Hello and welcome to this walkthrough of the Commercial Agile Framework. I'm going to take you through how it works today and also explain some of the benefits of using it. There are a lot of frameworks on the market at the moment, and this one has some specific benefits that I'd like to share with you. It's also fully available online, and I'll provide a link at the end of the presentation so you can have a look yourself. This is an overview. There's a lot of information, such as how to create a product strategy, all available in detailed instructions. So what is the Commercial Agile Framework? Well, it has four major stages. The first one being product positioning. This is about how you position your product in the market. Who are your competitors? Who are you targeting? Which customers are going to make you the most money? What's your value proposition? Where are you solving the problems for customers? This helps you think that through. And obviously from that side, you can find you have weaknesses as well. So starting with the product positioning allows you to think through, where do I need to make changes? Next, we have strategic direction. This is a strategy process that feeds into the strategic areas. Now, what you'll find in a lot of organizations, and we'll cover some of the anti-patterns later, is that they are brainstorming software features, whereas CAF takes very specific inputs, for example, how strong your competitors are, in order to improve your product position in the market. Once you have a strategic direction and you've prioritized that, you move to strategic areas. These are the strategy items that you give your teams. And then your teams will basically build out what we call minimum valuable increments. This is the smallest amount of value that you can get to market to achieve something from your strategy. In some cases, if you're building a very large feature, this might be quite big. In other cases, it could be a couple of weeks worth of work. Once you've built a minimum valuable increment, you can assess your strategy's success. You look at your strategic area and you say, did this work? And if you need to, you can stop it or even pivot to a slightly different solution. Next, once you've released minimum valuable increments, you're obviously in a position to improve your product positioning, and this completes the loop. So to summarize in the sentence that I have on the screen, CAF allows an organization to move seamlessly from strategy to rapid iteration with small increments of value. It combines both the strategic side of the business and the fast test and learn agility that you want in order to be successful. This is the full framework, and as you can see here, there are in some cases full outputs and in other cases individual items that need to be produced. So for example, if I take the product positioning, the market positioning relates to a canvas which is free, and I will show that at the end of the presentation just as an example. It also gives you instructions on how to create your ideal customer profile. This is the customer that's going to make you the most money. In this case, you can see B2B and B2C options. B2B is business to business and B2C is business to customer. If you are in a business to business environment, particularly in software, you will often find that you have a separate set of buyers that are different from the set of users. Your ideal customer profile could be particular types of company, and therefore you have those three artifacts. Moving to the strategic direction, and there is a lot in CAF around threats and opportunities. For example, market trends, technology, what your software quality is doing to your customer, and you also have a user experience vision. Now, this allows you to take potential strategic items and visualize them to give people a better idea about what you're talking about. It gives you that first view of like, is this worth doing? What do I mean by it? That can create alignment at the senior level before you invest a lot of time and effort in something. Next, you move to strategic area prioritization, which takes into account things like keep the lights on, or let's say legal, regulatory, mandatory change, all the way through to differentiators. If I have a particular competitor that's getting ahead of me, how do I respond to that? Do I match their differentiator, or do I create something new? It gives you all the tools that you need to do that. Strategies or strategic areas, as we're talking here, can belong to one or many teams. So you might have a couple of teams working on a particular strategy, or you may have a one-to-one. The strategic area is at the point where you want to get into a bit more detail. So you have a company KPI, which is what does this particular item link to? Is it, for example, trying to increase annual recurring revenue? You also have the problem statement, which is probably the most important part of the framework. If you are solving a big enough problem, for example, if the big enough problem is around cost, or if you have a big enough customer problem that you're solving, you are much more likely to be successful than focusing on the solution, which is picking a solution and then not thinking too much about the problem and finding out later on that, let's say, the customers don't care about what you're talking about. Next, you've got objectives and key results. The objective is a summary of your strategy, and the key results help you measure that. The investment period, rather than an estimate at this stage, allows you to think about how much do I need to invest? Is it 6 months? Is it 12 months? Is it even 18 months plus? At this point, you can actually stop the strategy. If you look at it and you say, actually, this isn't commercially viable, or it's not going to achieve its benefits, you could say, right, this investment's not worth it. Target persona is about who is this for. If it's an internal change, this is not relevant. But let's say you have a number of different types of users. You might have somebody that does all the report writing, and that particular persona needs to be called out here. Next, you have the MVI backlog, which is what is the backlog of work. And the minimum viable increments are the actual work items. Now, the idea here is that they are as small as possible in order to bring value. That doesn't mean they are necessarily very small. If you're releasing a feature for the first time, you may have quite a lot of functionality in it, but it's the minimum amount of functionality in order to solve the problem that you're trying to solve for customers. Next, you'll see the problem statement for the MVI. These are slightly lower level. So, for example, if I'm solving a data quality issue for the strategic area, this minimum viable increment could represent one type of problem with data quality. Next, objectives and key results again helps you measure that. These are what's called leading indicators. So if the minimum valuable increment comes back with poor results, it may suggest that the strategic area needs to be validated or even thrown away. Next, we have a more detailed user experience concept. If you think about the user experience vision I spoke about earlier, this is a much more granular design, if you want to call it that, and it allows people to understand what needs to be built, what shape it's taking. It also allows customers to have a think about, like, is this what I was expecting when someone spoke to me about this idea? We have solution definition. You can have multiple types of solution. Some version are tactical, others much more strategic long term. You may even be integrating new frameworks. Having discussions around which solution option do I want to go for is very important. Next, you look at identifying assumptions. So I've chosen my solution. I know it's going to do what I need to, but where is the risk? So rather than a very long discovery process where you basically start to just play around with ideas and so on, here you can specifically say, where is the risk? So if I've got a problem where it's not clear if the customer's going to want this, maybe I think up a test in my discovery period in order to check that. Or if I'm not sure, let's say 2 servers can connect to each other, then maybe I want a small technical test to prove that they can. This allows you to move most of the risk outside of the build period, which, as you'll see in the next stage, allows you to get much more likely that you can estimate. From there, you move to build, and then you assess your results. And if all's going well, you will obviously assess results of the minimum viable increment. And if you get enough information back, you may then assess the results of the strategic area. Finally, we look at improving our product positioning once we've delivered something, and then moving on to the next stage where we go back to strategic direction and look at the next set of thoughts we have around where we want to go. So this whole thing, think of it as a loop with a lot of feedback in it. Problems that CAF solves. So why should you use this? A lot of frameworks on the market. Why shouldn't I just pick up Scrum? Why shouldn't I just pick up Safe? Isn't Scrum at scale good enough? All of these questions should be answered in the next section. So let's take a solution focus. If we take our feature ideas and then we do a small change, iterating through that, and then getting user research on feedback, this can work very well. The problem this is where the small change isn't actually that small. Let's say I'm building for 6 months or even longer and then getting feedback. This can be very, very expensive. So what I'm finding is that I could have learned earlier. I could have done a bit more testing up front in order to find out that actually customers weren't that fussed with this. More to the point, customers won't pay for it. So having all of the user research after your build can sound like something that's really positive, but actually can be a real failure point. You'll see on the right here the way that CAF approaches testing. And I've covered some of this earlier. So you take a feature idea and then you take that to a strategic area. You do user research to define the problem. So maybe you've written a problem statement. You've thought, okay, customers, let's say, having a problem with data quality. Let's go and research that and see how much time they're wasting on that every day. I can even quantify that. I could think about how much revenue are they losing from doing that activity. This creates a much better business case. Then I move to the feature MVI backlog. Once I've defined the problem, I know enough about the problem to start solutionizing. And I move to my minimal valuable increments. I can do my tests. We spoke about these earlier. I've got my high-level technical design. I've got a technical spike. These are all optional. Or I've got commercial viability testing where I want to see if customers are going to pay for something, or maybe I'm working with the business to see whether or not the support costs make sense. Only after this do I think about my build, measure, learn. And I can go to alpha or beta test rather than straight to live. Alpha being testing internally, and beta being testing with a limited set of customers, or simply labeling the feature as beta and seeking feedback from your entire customer base. Next, and this is a major problem for subscription-based products in particular like SaaS offerings, where they're not focused on pricing model. For example, I'm going to go in and I'm going to think up feature ideas, then I'm going to do my user research, I'm going to do my small change, etc. But then it's like, well, where do I put this? Is this a feature that I'm going to add on as something that's specifically priced independently? Is this something which I'm putting into a pricing tier to get more customers to sign up for that pricing tier? Is this something customers even care about? So not thinking about pricing can be a real problem. What we do with CAF is we think through the pricing in terms of, are the pricing tiers competitive, where we might just want to defend our market position. Let's say our highest tier is not selling. Well, maybe I want to put a differentiator into that highest tier in order to drive more sales. I could increase usage that's chargeable. So maybe I want to bring more, let's say I'm charging per user. I want to create more functionality that drives more users in an organization onto my platform. That will increase profit. Or I want to convince existing customers to upgrade. So I've created a new feature in a higher pricing tier that they really want. Maybe it'll save them a lot of money and they want to go up the pricing tier in order to increase profit. Finally, convincing new customers to join higher tiers. So rather than trying to convince existing customers to spend more, it'd be even better if our new customers came in and immediately joined higher pricing tiers. Then you don't have the upselling costs or the complications of the upselling side of things throughout that customer's life cycle. Here's some business case anti-patterns that CAF solves, and this is what people used to be very, very good at in organizations, which is having a business strategy, creating a very detailed business case. Often this is very time consuming because you're trying to do a lot of upfront work, financial modeling, etc. You're really trying to understand, like, is this worth doing? And then these tend to end up with large changes. The problem with this is they're often built on lots of assumptions. I'm assuming customers want this, I'm assuming it can be built. And a lot of this ends up being discovered at the point where the change goes live, which is extremely expensive. So the business case, the business strategy side of things was very strong, but the test and learn was missing. And then what you can also find out is that if you don't have a lot of test and learn, when it goes live, you get low customer satisfaction as well. Temptation with really large-scale change is to move on to the next big thing, and sometimes things can get left in a bad state as well. Customer issues anti-pattern, very common issue with agile frameworks, where a team is asked to continually fill a backlog, improve what's happening, and they will look for customer issues. Maybe they're going to go and talk to their key customer and ask them for feature ideas. They will continually build and build and build. But actually what happens here is you have not got a proper strategy layer in place. So you're not thinking through, how am I going to defeat competitors, or how am I going to stand out in the market? So yes, you might be incrementally improving your product, but you're not optimizing for success here. And the danger is low overall impact. So maybe one or two customers have requested a feature, they're very happy with it, but that isn't sufficient to get the money back that you've spent for, maybe you've invested 6 months or 12 months, maybe £1 million on something, and you're thinking, well, yes, I've got a couple of customers that like this, but the revenue's not there to justify it. So just to summarize CAF, CAF allows organizations to be both strategic and iterative in the way that they work. and it also helps you stop early. Two very major benefits. This is an example of a canvas. I mentioned earlier that CAF contains a lot of instructions on how to actually do this work. And here you have the market positioning canvas, so you can see that you can model out your competition or even your brand equity. How are you going to position yourself in the market? Do you have good customer loyalty? We have value proposition here, so what sort of problems are we solving for customers? Now, these are the really key ones. Right? And are we differentiated? Are these unique differentiators, or are these just the same thing that everybody else has got? So these canvases in particular allow you to understand how to do these activities rather than talking about them from a theoretical level. And you'll find detailed instructions for each canvas online. That leads me to the final link. So you can see here www.innerc.co.uk and then Innerc-framework. This is where you'll find the Commercial Agile Framework. And thank you very much for listening.